here. Yeah, it's definitely in here. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of George before we get into the Little Women girls. Sitting in here, the dad's home, so I'm gonna get in here and I'm gonna keep reading. This is a new book. We've not done this one yet. And I did that for a reason. Alright. Little Women, Chapter 10. The PC and PO. As spring came on, a new set of amusements became the fashion, and the lengthening days gave long afternoons for work and play of all sorts. The garden had to be put in order, for each sister had a quarter of the little plot to do with the like with. Hannah used to say, "I know which of each of them gardenings belong to, if I see 'em in Chinty." And so she might, for the girls' tastes differed as much as their characters. Meg's had roses and heliotrope, myrtle, and a little orange tree in it. Jo's bed was never alike 2 seasons, for she was always trying experiments. This year it was to be a plantation of sunflowers, the seeds of which cheerful aspirant plant were to feed Aunt Cockletop and her family of chicks. Beth had old-fashioned fragrant flowers in her garden, sweet peas and mignonette, larkspur, pinks, pansies, and southernwood, which chickwood for the birds and catnip for the pussies. Amy had bower in hers, rather small and earwiggy, but very pretty to look at, with honeysuckle and morning glories hanging their colored horns and bells in graceful wreaths. All over it, tall white lilies, delicate ferns, and so many brilliant, picturesque plants as would consent to blossom there. Gardening. Walks rose on the river, and flower hunts employed the fine days, and for rainy ones they had house diversions, some old, some new, all more or less. One of these was the PC, for secret societies were in fashion. It was thought proper to have one, and as all the girls admired Dickens, they called themselves the Pickwick Club. With a few interruptions, they had kept this up for a year, and met every Saturday evening in the big garret, on which occasions the ceremonies were as follows. 3 chairs were arranged in a row before a table on which was a lamp, also 4 white badges with a big PC in different colors on each, and the weekly newspaper called the Pickwick Portfolio, to which all contributed something, while Jo, who reveled in pens and ink, was the editor. At 7 o'clock the 4 members ascended to the clubroom, tied their badges round their heads, and took their seats with great solemnity. Meg, as the eldest, was Samuel Pickwick, Jo, being of a literary turn, Augustus Snodgrass, Beth, because she was round and rosy, Tracy Tupman, and Amy, who was always trying to do what she couldn't, was Nathaniel Winkle Pickwick. The president. Read the paper, which was filled with original tales, poetry, local news, funny advertisements, and hints in which they good naturally reminded each other of their faults and shortcomings. On one occasion, Mr. Pickwick put on a pair of spectacles of satin glass, rapped up the table, himped, and having stared hard at Mr. Snodgrass, who was tilting back in his chair till he arranged himself properly, began to read. The Pickwick Portfolio, May 20th, 18. Poets' Corner, Anniversary Ode. Again we meet to celebrate, with badge and solemn rite, our 52nd anniversary in Pickwick's Hall tonight. We all are here in perfect health, none gone from our small band. Our Pickwick. Again we see each well-known face, and press each friendly hand. Our Pickwick always at his post. With reverence we greet, as spectacles on nose, he reads our well-filled weekly sheet. Although he suffers from a cold, we joy to hear him speak, from words of wisdom from the fall, in spite of croak and queak. Old 6-foot Snodgrass looms on high, with elephantine grace, and beams upon the company with brown and jovial face. Poetic fire lights up his eye. He struggles against his lot. Behold ambition on his brow, and on his nose a blot. Next, our peaceful Tuppence comes, so rosy, plump, and sweet. who chokes with laughter at the puns and tumbles off his seat. Prim little Winkle, too, is here, with every hair in place, a model of propriety, though he hates to wash his face. The year is gone, we will unite to joke and laugh and read, and tread the path of literature that doth to glory read. Long may our paper prosper well, our club unbroken be, and coming years their blessings pour on the useful gay PC. A. Snodgrass. The Masked Marriage. A Tale of Venice. Gindles after Gindles swept up to the marble steps and left it lovely low to swell the brilliant throng that filled to stately halls of Count de Aldelon, knights and ladies, elves and pages, monks and flower girls. Chapter 11, Experiments. The 1st of June. The Kings are off to the seashore tomorrow, and I'm free. 3 months' vacation, how I shall enjoy it! Exclaiming Meg, coming home one warm day to find Joe laid upon a sofa in an unusual state of exhaustion, while Beth took off her dusty boots, and Amy made lemonade for the refreshment of the whole party. Aunt March went today, for which, oh, be joyful, said Joe. I was mortally afraid she'd ask me to go with her. If she had, I should have felt as if I had ought to do it. But Plumfield is about as gay as a churchyard, and I'd rather be excused. We had a flurry getting the old lady off, and I had a fright every time she spoke to me, for I was in such a hurry to be through that I was uncommonly helpful and sweet, and feared she'd find it impossible to part from me. I quaked till she was fairly in the carriage, and I had a final fright. For as it drove off, she propped out her head, saying, "Josie fine, won't you?" I didn't hear anyone, for I basically turned out and fled. I did actually run and whisk around the corner, where I felt safe. Poor old Joe. She came in looking as if bears were after her, and said Beth, as she cuddled her sister's feet with a motherly air, "Aunt March is a regular samphire, is she not?" observed Amy, tasting her mixture critically. "She means vampire, not seaweed, but it doesn't matter. It's too warm to be particular about one's part of speech," murmured Joe. What shall you do on your vacation?" asked Amy, changing the subject with tact. "I shall lie abed late and do nothing," replied Meg from the depths of the rocking chair. "I've been routed up early all winter and had to spend my days working for other people. So now I'm going to rest and revel to my heart's content." "No," said Joe, "that dozy way wouldn't suit me. I've laid in a heap of books, and I'm going to improve my shining hours reading on my perch in the old apple tree when I'm not having." "Don't say larks," implored Amy as a return, snub for the atmosphere correction. "I'll say nightingales, then, with Laurie. That's proper and appropriate, since he's a warbler. Don't let us do any lessons, Beth, for a while, but play all the time and rest, as the girls mean to," proposed Amy. "Well, I will, if Mother doesn't mind. I want to learn some new songs, and my children need fitting up for the summer. They are dreadfully out of order and really suffering for clothes." "May we, Mother?" asked Meg, turning to Mrs. March, who sat sewing in what they called Marmy's corner. "You may try your experiment for a week and see how you like it. I think by Saturday nights you will find that all play and no work is as bad as all work had no play." "Oh, dear, no. It'll be delicious, I'm sure," said Meg complacently. "I now propose a toast, as my friend and partner, Sary Gramp, says. Fun forever, and no grubbing," cried Joe, rising glass in hand as the lemonade went round. They all drank it merrily and began the experiment by longing for the rest of the day. Next morning Meg did not appear till 10 o'clock. Her solitary breakfast did not taste nice, and the room seemed lonely and untidy, for Joe had not filled the vases. Beth had not dusted, and Amy's books lay scattered about. Nothing was neat and pleasant but Marmy's corner, which looked as usual. And there Meg sat, to rest and read, which meant to yawn and imagine what pretty summer dresses she would get with her salary. Joe spent the morning on the river with Laurie, and the afternoon reading and crying over the wide, wide world, up in the apple tree. Beth began rummaging everywhere out of the big closet where her family resided, but getting tired before half done, she left her establishment topsy-turvy and went to her music, rejoicing that she had no dishes to wash. Army arranged her bower, but on her best white frock smoothed her curls and sat down to draw under the honeysuckle, hoping someone would see and inquire who the young artist was, as no one appeared but an inquisitive Daddy Longlegs, who examined her work with interest. She went to walk, got caught in a shower, and came home dripping. At tea time they compared notes, and all agreed that it had been a delightful, though unusually long day. Meg, who went shopping in the afternoon and got a sweet blue muslin, had discovered after she had cut the breadths off that it wouldn't wash, which mishap made her slightly cross. Joe had burned the skin off her nose boating and got a raging headache by reading too long. Beth was worried by the confusion of her closet and the difficulty of learning 3 or 4 songs at once. And Amy deeply regretted the damage done to her frock. For Katie's brow's party was to be best next day, and now, like Flora McFlimsy, she had nothing to wear. But these were mere trifles, and they assured their mother that the experiment was working finely. She smiled, said nothing, and with Hannah's help did their neglected work, keeping home pleasant and the domestic machinery running smoothly. It was astonishing what a peculiar and uncomfortable state of things was produced by the resting and reveling process. The days kept getting longer and longer. The days kept getting longer and longer. The weather was unusually variable, and so were tempers. An unsettled feeling possessed everyone, and Satan found plenty of mischief for the idle hands to do. As the height of luxury, Meg put out some of her sewing, and then found some time so heavily that she felt so snipping and spoiling her clothes in her attempts to furbish them up a la Moffat. Joe read till her eyes gave out, and she was sick of books. Got so fidgety that even good-natured Laurie had a quarrel with her, and so reduced in spirits that she desperately wished she had gone with Aunt Marge. Beth got on pretty well, for she was conscious of forgetting that it was to be all play and no work, and fell back into her old ways now and then. But something in the air affected her, and more, once her tranquility was much disturbed. So much so that on occasion was actually shook poor dear Joanna and told her she was a fright. Amy fared worst of all, for her resources were small, and when her sisters left to her, so amused herself as she soon found that accomplice and an important little self a great burden. She didn't like dolls. Fairy tales were childish, and one couldn't draw all the time. Tea parties didn't amount to much. Neither did picnics unless very well conducted. If one could have a fine house full of nice girls or go traveling, the summer would be delightful. But to stay at home with 3 selfish sisters and a grown-up boy was enough to try the patience of a beau, complained Miss Malaprop, after several days devoted to pleasure, fretting, and anew. No one would own that they were very tired of the experiment, but by Friday night Edith acknowledged to herself that she was glad the week was nearly done. Hoping to impress the lesson more deeply, Mrs. March, who had had a good of humor, resolved to finish off the trial in an improper manner. So she gave Hannah a holiday and let the girls enjoy the full effect of the play system. When they got up on Saturday morning, there was no fire in the kitchen, no breakfast in the dining room, and no mother anywhere to be seen. "Mercy on us! What has happened?" cried Joe, staring about her in dismay. Meg ran upstairs and soon came back again, looking relieved but rather bewildered and a little ashamed. "Mother isn't sick, only very tired, and she says she's going to stay quietly in her room all day and let us do the best we can. It's a very queer thing for her to do. She doesn't act a bit like herself. But she says it has been a hard week for her, so we mustn't grumble but take care of ourselves." "That's easy enough, and I like the idea." "I'm aching for something to do, that is. Some new amusement, you know," added Joe quickly. In fact, it was an immense relief to them all to have a little work, and they took hold with a will. But soon realized the truth of Hannah's saying, housekeeping ain't a joke. There was plenty of food in the larder, and while Beth and Amy sat at the table, Meg and Joe got breakfast, wondering as they did why servants ever talked about hard work. "I shall take some up to Mother, though she said we were not to think of her, for she'd take care of herself," said Meg, who presided and felt quite matronly behind the teapot. So the tray was fitted out before anyone began and taken up with the cook's compliments. The boiled tea was very bitter, the omelet scorched, and the biscuits speckled with saleratus, but Mrs. March received her repast with thanks and laughed heartily over it after Joe was gone. "Poor little souls, they will all have a hard time, I'm afraid, but they won't suffer, and it will do them good," she said, producing more palatable viands with which she had provided herself, and disposing of the bad breakfast, so that their feelings might not be hurt. A motherly little deception for which they were grateful. Many were the complaints below, and great the chagrin of the head cook of her failures. "Never mind, I'll get the dinner and you be servant. You be mistress. Keep your hands nice, see company, and give orders," said Joe, who knew still less than Meg about culinary affairs. The obliging offer was gladly accepted, and Margaret retired to the parlor, which she hastily put in order by whisking the little under the sofa and shutting the blinds to save the trouble of dusting. Joe, with perfect faith in her own powers and a friendly desire to make up the quarrel, immediately put a note in the office inviting Laurie to dinner. "You'd better see what you've got before you think of having company," said Meg, when informed of the hospitable but rash act. "Oh, there's your corned beef and plenty of potatoes, and I shall get some asparagus and a lobster for a relish, as Hannah says. We'll have a lettuce and make a salad. I don't know how, but the book tells. I'll have blants made and strawberries for dessert, and coffee too if you want to be elegant. Don't try too many messes, Joe, for you can't make anything but gingerbread and molasses candy fit to eat. I washed my hands off the dinner party, and since you have asked Laurie on your own responsibility, you may just take care of him." "I don't want you to do anything but be civil to him and help to the pudding." "You'll give me your advice if I give in a muddle, won't you?" asked Joe, rather hurt. "Yes, but I don't know much, except about bread and a few trifles. You had better ask Mother's leave before you order anything," returned Meg prudently. "Of course I shall. I'm not a fool." And Joe went off in a huff at the doubts expressed of her powers. "Get what you like and don't disturb me. I'm going out to dinner and can't worry about things at home. said Mrs. March when Joe spoke to her. I never enjoyed housekeeping, and I'm going to take a vacation today and read, write, go visiting, and amuse myself. The unusual spectacle of her busy mother, rocking comfortable and reading hard early in the morning, made Joe feel some unnatural phenomena had occurred, for an eclipse, an earthquake, or a volcanic eruption would hardly have seemed stranger. Everything is out of sorts somehow, she said to herself, going downstairs. There's Beth crying. That's the sure sign that something is wrong in the family. If Amy is bothering, I'll shake her. Feeling very much out of sorts herself, Joe hurried into the parlor to find Beth sobbing over Pip, the canary, who lay dead in the cage with his little claws pathetically extended, as if imploring the food for want of which he had died. It's all my fault I forgot him. There isn't a seed of drop left. Oh, Pip, how could I be so cruel to you? Cried Beth, taking the poor thing in her hands and trying to restore him. Joe peeped into his half-open eye, felt his little heart, and finding him stiff and cold, shook her head and offered her a domino box for a coffin. Put him in the oven, and maybe he will get warm and revive, said Abby hopefully. He's been starved, and he shan't be baked now he's dead. I'll make him a shroud, and he shall be buried in the garden. I'll never have another bird. Never my Pip, for I am too bad to own one, murmured Beth, sitting on the floor with her pet folding in her hands. The funeral shall be the afternoon, and we shall all go. Now don't cry, Bethy. It's a pity, for nothing goes right this week, and Pip has had the worst of this experiment. Make the shroud, and lay him in my box, and after the dinner party we'll have a nice little funeral, said Joe, beginning to feel as if she had undertaken a good deal. Leaving the others to console Beth, she departed to the kitchen, which was in a most discouraging state of confusion. Putting on a big apron, she fell to work and got the dishes piled up ready for washing, when she discovered that the fire was out. Here's a sweet prospect, muttered Joe, slamming the stove door open and poking vigorously among the cinders. Having rekindled the fire, she thought she would go to market while the water heated. The walk revived her spirits, and flattering herself that she had made good bargains, she trudged home again. After buying a very young lobster, some very old asparagus, and 2 boxes of acid strawberries. By the time she got cleared up, the dinner arrived, and the stove was red hot. Hannah had left a pan of bread to rise. Meg had worked it up early, set it on the hearth for a second rising, and forgotten it. Meg was entertaining Sally Gardner in the parlor when the door flew open, and floury, crockery, flushed, and disheveled figure appeared, demanding tartly, "I say, isn't bread riz enough when it runs over the pans?" Sally began to laugh, but Meg nodded and lifted her eyebrows as high as they would go, which caused the apparition to vanish and put the sour bread into the oven without further delay. Mrs. March went out, after peeping here and there to see how matters went, also saying a word of comfort to Beth, who sat making a winding sheet, while the dear departed lay in state in the domino box. A strange sense of helplessness fell upon the girls as the gray bonnet vanished round the corner, and despair seized them when a few minutes later Miss Crocker appeared and said she'd come to dinner. Now this lady was a thin yellow spinster with a sharp nose and inquisitive eyes, who saw everything and gossiped about all she saw. They disliked her, but had been taught to be kind to her, simply because she was old and poor and had few friends. So Meg gave her the easy chair and tried to entertain her. while she was asked questions, criticized everything, and told stories of the people whom she knew. Language cannot describe the anxieties, experiences, and exertions which Jo underwent that morning, and the dinner she served up became a standing joke. Fearing to ask any more advice, she did her best alone, and discovered that something more than energy and goodwill is necessary to make a cook. She boiled the asparagus for an hour, and was grieved to find the heads cooked off and the stalks harder than ever. The bread burned black, for the salad dressed and aggravated her that she could not make it fit to eat. The lobster was a Scottish miss to her, but she hammered and poked it till it was unshelled and its meager proportions concealed in a grove of lettuce leaves. The potatoes had to be hurried, not to keep the asparagus waiting, and were not done at the last. The blanched maize was lumpy, and the strawberries not as ripe as they looked, having been skillfully deaconed. Well, they can't eat beef and bread and butter if they are hungry, only it's mortifying to have. It's only mortifying to have to spend your whole morning for nothing, thought Jo, as she rang the bell half an hour later than usual, and stood hot, tired, and dispirited, surveying the feast spread before Laurie, accustomed to all sorts of elegance, and Mrs. Crocker, whose rattling tongue would report them far and wide. Poor Jo would gladly have done under the table, as one thing after another was tasted and left. While Amy giggled, Meg looked distressed, Miss Crocker pursed her lips, and Laurie talked and laughed with all his might to give a cheerful tone to his festive scene. Jo's one strong point was the fruit, for she had sugared it well, and had a pitch of rich cream to eat with. Her hot cheeks cooled a trifle, and she drew a long breath as the pretty glass plates went round, and everyone looked graciously at the little rosy islands floating in a sea of cream. Miss Crockett tasted first, made a wry face, and drank some water hastily. Jo, who refused, thinking there might not be enough, for they dwindled sadly after the picking over, glanced at Laurie. But he was eating away manfully, though there was a slight pucker about his mouth, and he kept his eye fixed on the plate. Amy, who was fond of delicate fare, took a heaping spoonful, choked, hid her face in her napkin, and left the table perceptibly. "Oh, what is it?" exclaimed Jo, trembling. "Salt instead of sugar, and the cream is sour," replied Meg with a tragic gesture. Jo uttered a groan and fell back into her chair, remembering that she had given a last hasty powdering the berries out of one of the 2 boxes on the kitchen table, and had neglected to put the milk in the refrigerator. She turned scarlet and was on the verge of crying, when she met Laurie's eyes, which she would look merry in spite of his heroic efforts. The comical side of the affair suddenly struck her, and she laughed. All the tears ran down her cheeks. So did everyone else, even Croker. As the girls called the old lady, the unfortunate dinner ended gaily with bread and butter, olives, and fun. "I haven't strength of mind enough to clear up now, so we will sober ourselves with the funeral," said Jo as they rose, and Miss Crocker made ready to go, being eager to tell the new story at Mother's friend's dinner table. They did sober themselves for Beth's sake. Laurie dug a grave from the ferns in the grove. Little Pip was laid in, with many tears by his tender-hearted mistress, and covered with moss, while a wreath of violets and chickweed was hung on the stone which bore his epitaph, composed by Jo while she struggled with the dinner. "Here lies Pip March, who died the 7th of June, loved in Leamington sore, and not forgotten soon." At the conclusion of the ceremony, Beth retired at her home, overcome with emotion and a lobster, but there was no place of repose, for the beds were not made, and she found her grief much assuaged by beating up the pillows and putting things in order. Meg helped Jo clear away the remains of the feast, which took half the afternoon and left them so tired that they agreed to be contented with tea and toast for supper. Laurie took Amy to drive, which was a debt of charity, for the sour cream seemed to have had a bad effect upon her temper. Mrs. March came home to find the three older girls hard at work in the middle of the afternoon, and a glance at the closet gave her an idea of the success of one part of the experiment. But before the housewives could rest, several people called, and there was a scramble to get ready to see them. Then tea must be got, errands done, and one or two necessary bits of sewing neglected until the last minute. As twilight fell, dewy and still, one by one they gathered on the porch where the June roses were budding beautifully, and each groaned or sighed as she sat down, as if tired or troubled. "What a dreadful day this has been," began Joe, usually the first to speak. "It has seemed shorter than usual, but so uncomfortable," said Meg. "Not a bit like home," added Amy. "It can't seem so without Marmee and little Pip," sighed Beth, glancing with full eyes at the empty cage above her head. "Here's Mother, dear, and you shall have another bird tomorrow if you want it." As she spoke, Mrs. March came and took her place among them, looking as if her holiday had not been much pleasanter than theirs. "Are you satisfied with your experiment, girls, or do you want another week of it?" she asked, as Beth nestled up to her, and the rest turned toward her with brightening faces, as flowers turn toward the sun. "I don't," cried Joe decidedly. "Nor I," echoed the others. "You think, then, that it is better to have a few duties and live a little for others, do you?" "Lounging and larking doesn't pay," observed Joe, shaking her head. "I'm tired of it and mean to go to work at something right off. Suppose you learn plain cooking. That's a useful accomplishment which no woman should be without," said Mrs. March, laughing inaudibly at the recollection of Joe's dinner party, for she had met Mrs. Crocker and heard her account of it. "Mother, did you go away and let everything be just to see how we get on?" cried Meg, who had suspicions all day. "Yes, I wanted you to see how the comfort of all depends on each doing her share faithfully. While Hannah and I did your work, you got on pretty well, though I don't think you were very happy or amiable. So I thought, as a little lesson, I would show you what happens when everyone thinks only of herself. Don't you feel that it is pleasanter to help one another, to have daily duties which make leisure sweet when it comes, and to bear and forbear what home may be comfortable and lovely to us all?" "We do, Mother, we do," cried the girls. "Then let me advise you to take up your little burdens again, for though they seem heavy sometimes, they are good for us, and lighten as we learn to carry them. Work is wholesome, there is plenty for everyone. It keeps us from ennui and mischief, is good for health and spirits, and gives us a sense of power and independence better than money and fashion. We'll work like bees and love it too. See if we don't," said Joe. "I'll learn plain cooking for my holiday task, and the next dinner party I have shall be a success. I'll make this set of shirts for Father's, instead of letting you do it. Marmee, I can and I will, though I'm not fond of sewing. That will be better than fussing over my own things, which are plenty nice enough as they are," said Meg. "I'll do my lessons every day, and not spend so much time with my music and dolls. I am a stupid thing, and ought to be studying, not playing," was Beth's resolution, while Amy followed their example, by heroically declaring, "I shall learn to make buttonholes and attend to my parts of speech." "Very good. Then I am quite satisfied with the experiment, and fancy that we shall not have to repeat it. Only don't go to the other extreme and delve like slaves. Have regular hours for work and play. Make each day both useful and pleasant, and prove that you understand the worth of time by employing it well. Then youth will be delightful, old age will bring few regrets, and life become a beautiful success in spite of poverty. We'll remember, Mother." And they did.